Hey folks, we're going to talk about Unit 2, difference between let and var, template strings, booleans, and switch statements, all the Unit 2 stuff. The video will be divided up into chapters at the bottom so you can skip to the part that you need help with. Alright, so let's get started. Let and var, you've probably seen both used on various websites in examples. Maybe some of the stuff I gave you was using let or var. The major difference here is kind of confusing and won't make sense with what we know so far. You can look it up. I'll talk about it more when we get to that point where it'll make sense. We can super simplify it for now. Just always use let. So when you're declaring a variable, you have to specify let or var. If you're familiar with programming at all, it has to do with scope. So just use let and you won't have any issues. All right. Let's talk about template strings. So you guys have been concatenating your strings up until this point. There is an easier way. So if I want to print out a message here. So here I'm concatenating a string literal with two variables, right? Because I've declared apple up here, assigned a value of 1, the integer value of 1. Banana is 2. So down here when I display the message, it should say 1, hello, 2. 1, hello, 2. All right. So let's say we wanted to add some more to the end. We could concatenate on more strings and add more variables, however you want it to display. The annoying thing here is you have to remember to put a plus sign between each item, and around your strings you gotta have double quotes, so it can get kind of messy the more you have in there. So you can also use a template string, and so here you start with a tick mark. So this is up at the top left of the keyboard. Just show you here on a picture of a keyboard. So we're talking about this key right here, the tick mark. You use these instead of double quotes and you can create a template string. And what this allows you to do is put variables right into the strings. You just have to denote them with curly braces. So if I wanted to create the string above, I could do this. Make sure I get the syntax right here. Oh, it's a $sign. And you have to put a $sign here. So it's looking for $signs in the string, in your template string, to tell it when to put variables. So here we can put apple, hello, banana. All right. And then I don't have to remember to put in my plus sign and my double quotes, and we can make it a lot more concise. Strings. So feel free to use these. You can either continue to use string concatenation or these template strings. Either way is fine. They're both correct. So we should see it does the same thing. For our purposes on the back end, it's doing something a little different, but if you prefer to not have to keep track of all your plus signs and double quotes, you can use the string templates. Fairly simple. All right, so let's take a look now at the next part. Booleans. So in JavaScript and most languages. There are two Boolean values, true and false. So that means there is an actual keyword that represents true and false. Also, sometimes I forget my semicolons, so try to remember those. So here we have the value of false and the value of true. See how they're yellow? That's going to be different than if I make these strings. You can see these are yellow because this is the value false and the value true. This is just the string false and the string true. Okay, so what can we do with these Booleans? Well, this is where setting up conditions for the computer to test. This is where we use Booleans. And so in this unit, we're going to look at if statements, and that looks like, you have the keyword if, and then you have to provide your condition that will evaluate to either true or false, and then you can put a block of code that will run. So let's go ahead and say we have apple and banana here. Let's say we do if apple equals banana. So when you're doing your comparisons like this is a comparison operator for equals. Notice it's two equal signs. Remember, the single equal sign is the assignment operator. So down here, if these two are equal, it will run whatever line of code we have here. They are equal. All right, so I'm setting apple to 1, banana to 2. We're going to check if they're equal. And if they are, it should say they are equal. All right. I'm going to comment this out. So it didn't print that. If we make apple and banana the same, then it should print out they are equal. All right, so if statements create a conditional statement that will only run if the condition in here is true. Now you can use more than equals. The other conditional operators, you can look them up. You should be familiar. You most likely will be comparison operators. Here we go. Familiar with most of these. Tricky thing is equals, remember, is two equal signs. It will not work with just one. That's an assignment. Then we have greater than, less than. So you can use all those. Check whether values are greater than or less than. All right. And so it's ultimately trying to boil down to true or false. All right. So if the condition evaluates to true, it will run the code. So there it is. If it's false, it won't run the code. That's for an if statement. Now, you can also see that the conditions return a value. So let's say we have apple equals banana. I'm just going to print the result of that out, and then we'll do apple is less than banana. And so apple equal to banana came out as true because they're both 2. Apple less than banana is false because 2 is not less than 2. So here's our Booleans. And so remember, when you're doing if statements, you're trying to create a condition that will evaluate to true or false. And there's some other things here about if statements. All right, so that's about Booleans. So let's take a look. We have an if statement. We already saw that. We'll try that. Put a little message there. Okay. So with an if statement, if the value is true, it runs the code inside these curly braces, and then it continues on afterwards. Put a little message here. All right. So it'll say done once it's done running. So an if statement, and again, I'll change these so you can see now that they're not equal, this will evaluate to false, which means it won't run this line and it'll continue on. All right, now let's check out the next piece. If you understand if, pretty straightforward. We can also look at the if-else statement. So this is when you have code you need to run if something evaluates to true, and different code if it's going to evaluate to false. All right. So let's look at if-else. So this looks like this. You have your if statement, and then immediately after, before you do anything else, you have to put your else statement. And so what this means here is we're saying check whether apple and banana are equal. If they are, then print out this message. If they're not, print out this. Okay, so it'll only ever run this line 22 if this condition evaluates to true, and it will only run this line if this evaluates to false. All right, so, and this can only evaluate to true or false. So we're saying there's two different paths. Here are the different outcomes. So here, what will it print out? It says apple does not equal banana. 2. Now they're the same. And now it says they are equal. So with if and else, you can check those different states. Really useful thing for if-else is just checking if something is true, and then having a backup if it's not. We can use else for that. All right. If you have more than one condition you want to check, you can use something called an else-if statement. All right. So here, let's say we want to see, okay, if apple is equal to banana, print this. If it's not, then print this. Well, let's say if we want to know if they're greater than or less than, we want it to say that. If that's the case, then you'd put an else if in there, and we can put in if apple is greater than banana, then go ahead and say apple is less than banana. All right, and then we can do the same thing for greater than. Oop, that one is greater than. There we go, less than. So greater than or less than. All right. And so now we can see they're equal. Let me move these variables down so I don't have to scroll. Okay. If we make apple 1, it'll print out apple is less than banana. So the way this code is running, I hit run, it comes down to the first line, creates this variable. All right. And then it creates this variable, and then on line 32 it says compare those if it evaluates to true. So in this case it does not, it's false. So it says, okay, skip over this. Now check if it's greater than banana. It's not. 1 is not greater than 2. So it says skip over this. And then it just continues down until it finds one that matches. If it doesn't match, then it'll run the else. So in this case, you can check multiple conditions. All right. Another useful tool for checking multiple conditions, if you don't need to do number or value comparisons, you can use a switch statement to do this pretty easily. So in this case, we were comparing numbers and we had values that we were measuring against each other. Now let's just check if something's a certain value. Let me set it. Let me make it more clear here. Okay. So we'll do color. And we'll ask the user to input a color. Red, green, or blue. So remember, when you use the prompt function, whatever they type in, that gets stored in the variable as a string data type. All right. And so now we can do this. And we just follow the same pattern down. For each case. So if it's red, we want it to, for now you chose red. We can do the same thing for blue. And green. Okay. And then with switch statements, let me organize this a bit so you guys can see. Here's how I like to indent mine so you can kind of see the different parts. If it's red, if it's red, it's going to run this. If it's green, it's going to run this. If it's blue, it's going to run this one. The break stops it from continuing on through the rest of the statements. So what this is saying is, okay, on line 52, what's the value in color? And then run the line of code that matches. So in this case, if I do red, it says you chose red. Or if I do blue. So this is a good way, if you're just matching a bunch of options, switch statements are really good. Now remember, you're not using a condition here, so you don't want it to evaluate to true and false. You can use any values you want. You can use numeric also. So in this case, we're using strings. But if you want to use integers, let's use fingers. How many fingers do you have? All right, and then we can do fingers. Now remember, when you use prompt, it's going to come in as a string. And if we want fingers to be an integer, we have to convert it using parse int. So you can either do it on the same line like this, so what this is saying, and it's following order of operations. This whole statement is, let me put it on one line. And so when this runs, when the computer gets to this, it's going to look and say, okay, what's inside the innermost parentheses? It's this prompt. So it'll stop and ask you, how many fingers do you have? Once you type that in, it will then convert that to an integer and then store that into the fingers variable, where we can check it down here. And we'll just do a few here. So see, the number is a different color to help you identify that it's, red for strings, green for numbers, values. Okay. So I'm just not going to change the messages here. I have 1. It's going to go down here. Okay. I am going to change it because I don't want you to be confused. Okay, so how many fingers do you have? 1. You chose 1. So you see you can use different data types here, string or integer for your switch statements. All right, so that should be enough to get you started. Don't forget to look at the W3 Schools examples and contact me if you are stuck or need any help. I'm more than happy to help. And have a good day.